Hej, jag heter Daniel Jarblad och jobbar på Sveriges Ingenjörer. Och jag ska berätta om några av fördelarna med ett medlemskap hos oss. För det första, vi finns för dig som är ingenjör. Är du ingenjör är det självklart att du ska vara medlem i Sveriges största fackförbund för just ingenjörer. Vi är idag mer än 150 000 medlemmar och är det enda fackförbundet med fullständigt fokus på ingenjörer. Medlemskapet ger dig förmåner, trygghet och stöd under hela din karriär. Vad tjänar en ingenjör i min bransch? Och hur vet man om man har rätt lön? Det är vanliga frågor som vi får från våra medlemmar. Genom att använda vår ingenjörsspecifika lönestatistik med över 70 000 ingenjörslöner kan du jämföra din lön med andra i samma bransch eller yrkesroll. En annan uppskattad förmån som ingår i medlemskapet är vår inkomstförsäkring. Med den kan du få 80% av din månadslön upp till 100 000 kronor i månaden i 150 dagar. Jo, som ingenjör ska du känna dig trygg och säker på att du har bra arbetsvillkor. Därför är en av våra viktigaste arbetsuppgifter som fackförbund att förhandla fram branschanpassade kollektivavtal med reglerade arbetsvillkor. Vi kan även hjälpa dig om du har andra frågor som rör ditt jobb eller yrkesliv. Ställ dina frågor till någon av våra ombudsmän i rådgivningen. Ta hjälp av våra rådgivare om du har funderingar och frågor. Diskutera din karriärutveckling och få ditt CV granskat av våra experter om du vill ta nästa steg i karriären. Eller träffa andra ingenjörer genom att delta i våra seminarier eller engagera dig i något av våra nätverk. Utan dig stannar Sverige. Du och dina kollegor är faktiskt helt avgörande för Sveriges utveckling. Som fackförbund så jobbar vi aktivt för att visa på ingenjörers roll för arbetsgivare, samhällsutveckling och välfärd. Ja, det var några av våra förmåner som ingår i medlemskapet. Bli medlem i Sveriges Ingenjörer, du också. Varför inte ansöka om medlemskap redan idag? Antingen på webben eller genom att fylla i formuläret i vår broschyr. Varmt välkommen till Sveriges Ingenjörer.
Hello and welcome to this seminar we're going to have today here. It's going to be really awesome. My name is Daniel Jarblad from Sveriges Ingenjörer still. And with me I have Friedrich Heger, our senior advisor and ombudsman. A little bit before we start talking about the working conditions and benefits of doctoral candidates, which we'll be doing today, we will talk a little bit how our question answers will be working. Perhaps you want to click forward to that. So in order to ask questions to Friedrich, we have a question and answers part in the end of the seminar. And then you just simply grab your phone and you go to menti.com and you enter the code. You can see up here 139271 and then it says vote here, but what we will mean is that you can ask your questions then. You can ask more than one question. You can ask as many questions as you like. Friedrich will try his best to answer the questions in the end of the seminar. I'm sure you will do great with that. And I will take care of them until then. But let's go ahead and over to our senior advisor and ombudsman then, Friedrich Heger.
Thank you, Daniel. Guys, welcome. And here's a fact for you. Of all the research that's carried out per year here in Sweden in the field of technical engineering, about 45% of this research is done by you guys, doctoral candidates. And this is exactly the reason why I'm so happy to be able to be here today and to talk about your rights and obligations as doctoral candidates. you're contributing to the research society, you're doing a great job, but I want as well to enhance your knowledge with regards to what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do, what your rights, obligations and pitfalls are when you are a doctoral candidate. So, as I already said as well in the invitation to this seminar, we're going to talk about different conditions for doctoral candidates, because even though they're all called doctoral candidates, that does not necessarily mean that they do have the same type of employment, same rights. We're going to talk about the legal regulations for doctoral candidates, what kind of laws apply to you. We're going to talk about the Swedish social systems that you need to be aware of, parental leave, pensions. And we're as well going to talk about the fact that, well, at some point your employment will come to an end as a doctoral candidate. The sooner or later, if you want it or not, it will happen. But there's well a couple of pitfalls, a couple of things to actually think of. So with that said, I think we're going to get started. And I'm absolutely thrilled to give this presentation to roughly 500 people who are all over the world today listening to us. And we do as well have 3 local chapters with the Swedish engineers. I think it was in Linköping, it was here in Stockholm at the KTH, and then unfortunately the third one I've forgotten right now. I'm going to recap that with Daniel later on, who is well here listening as well in a small auditorium where they actually have met up. So welcome everyone once again, and let's get started. So there are different conditions for doctoral candidates. I think I could group up or split up the whole group of doctoral candidates in about 5 different groups. I'm just going to concentrate on those 3, which you would see here on my left-hand side. I'm going to talk about scholarship doctoral candidates, and let me already be clear now that this presentation, to the largest extent, unfortunately, is not applicable for scholarship doctoral candidates, and I'm going to tell you why as well. And then we're just going to talk about industrial doctoral candidates and about employed doctoral candidates and what the difference is, and something that we might want to be aware of. So, scholarship holders are not employees, okay? Scholarship holders are only enrolled, registered as doctoral candidates. Scholarship does not count as an income according to the Swedish tax law, and that means as well that they do not have an employment. And as you will see in the coming presentation, that loads of the benefits are based on the fact that someone has an employment. This means that scholarship holders are not entitled to all of those benefits. One of those things is that you're not entitled to an income-based unemployment benefit. So if your period as doctoral candidate comes to an end, you will not be entitled to any unemployment benefit, meaning if the scholarship has come to an end, there won't be any money coming in, or very little money will be coming in. Well, but things have improved slightly for scholarship holders, because I'm not happy about the situation that scholarship holders are in, right? Just because of the lack they have. So there are new regulations since the 1st of July 2018. That was a change to the law that has been carried out by the government, which several trade unions have been working for, and as well universities have been working for, that those changes are to occur. One of the rules is that scholarship is supposed to equal the income of an employed doctoral candidate after taxes. So if your scholarship is on 8,000 kroners, and we assume that a doctoral candidate maybe earns about 24,000 kroners, or let's say 20,000 kroners after taxes, then the employer is supposed to give you the difference between how much a scholarship is and how much a employed doctoral candidate has after taxes. Above that as well, the state universities, so that does except Chalmers and one other university as well, the state universities are as well supposed to offer or to sign insurance for illness and parental leave. So that means if someone is ill or is on parental leave and cannot make use of the scholarship money that runs in, or maybe has to postpone the scholarship, then they're entitled to insurance payments with regard to illness and parental leave. And as well, there's another regulation that we're really happy about, that it just basically passed the government, that there's employment for the 3 remaining years. So if you have 3 remaining years of work according to your individual study plan, then you're supposed to be employed. Unfortunately, that one as well does not apply to all different types of scholarships. I think Marie Curie and as well the CEDAR scholarships, they're actually an exception to the rule with regard to that. So there's still a couple of holes, but we can say on the overall, the situation has slightly improved for scholarship holders. So we're happy about that, but there's still a lot of work to be done in order to improve the situation for scholarship holders. If we look at the university doctoral candidate and industrial doctoral candidate, there are a couple of distinctions here. The supervisor for a university doctoral candidate is normally based at a university, maybe as well at 2 different universities. When it comes to the industrial doctoral candidate, he or she normally has a supervisor who's based at university, which is the main supervisor, and then we do as well have a supervisor which comes from the company. When it comes to the employment, a university doctoral candidate is employed within the university. The industrial doctor candidate is employed within the company where she works in. Enrollment, basically 2 of them are at the higher education institution at the university that they're based at, and those who pay for the education, which means basically material that you need, lab equipment, those kind of things. University doctoral candidate is paid for naturally by the university. When it comes to the industrial doctoral candidate, this is normally paid for by the company. So my main message here, takeaway message, is that industrial doctoral candidates normally in some ways do have to refer to 2 different type of organizations or associations when it comes to them carrying out their doctoral degree, because there is kind of a second player in there as well who contributes with financing, and where unfortunately as well, from what I've seen as well, difficulties can appear, not necessarily, but sometimes difficulties can appear that then as well need to be troubleshooted in maybe a little bit different manner. And as said, as the employment is within the company, that means that the collective agreement that is in place at this respective company, which kind of regulates some parts of the employment of an industrial doctoral candidate. This presentation mostly will relate to the benefits. When I talk about collective agreements, I'm going to talk about the benefits for university doctoral candidates, because they are the biggest amount of all doctoral candidates in this country. So, when it comes to legal regulations for doctoral candidates, this is the kind of next bigger block I'm going to talk about. We're going to look at what kind of rules and regulations do apply for you guys. We're going to talk about supervision, because that is super crucial. We're going to talk about the duration of employment, for how long can you actually be employed, what happens there. We're going to talk about right of extension. And we're going to talk about the withdrawal of resources, which doesn't happen very many times. But if it happens, I think we all need to be aware of what it means, and how it could affect the individual, and what you as well could do against it. So if we think of the legal regulation in this country, what you will see is that we have some basic laws in this country, which is valid for everyone who works in this country. But the general labour legislation in this country is just like a Swiss cheese, more holes than there are cheese actually. So in this case as well, there's a very basic regulation. It just regulates a little bit about what you're entitled to do, what you're not entitled to do. But lots of this general labour legislation can as well be altered, can be changed by means of collective agreements. Collective agreements is something that is negotiated by negotiations between the social partners, which is the employer, and on the other hand, which is trade unions, such as the Swedish Association of Graduate Engineers, or many other trade unions that there are. Inside the government, when you're employed at a university, you do join a trade union such as the Swedish Graduate Engineers, but you are represented by SACOS, which is a negotiation association. And SACOS does negotiate, as well on behalf of the members of the Swedish Graduate Engineers, does negotiate a collective agreement for governmental employees. So to them, all rules all the same rules do apply. Those collective agreements basically fill in the holes in the Swiss cheese of labor law regulation that we do have in this country. Above that, you do have collective agreements for all governmental employees, but we do as well have collective agreement and at different universities, such as KTH, such as GU, what have you. Those collective agreements are at least a working hour agreement, because they are locally agreed upon, and another one as well is the tariff structure for the pay of doctoral candidates, because doctoral candidates are on a tariff system with regards to their income. You're just based in a certain group, and then the group moves up according to how you basically proceed in the system, and this tariff system looks different for different universities. That's a local collective agreement. So all of this said here naturally means as well that there is an individual employment agreement in this country, but the individual employment agreement is very, very small, if you've seen that, because most of the questions are already regulated in the local collective agreements, which are green here, or in the blue collective agreements for governmental employees, which is kind of the overarching collective agreement. And as said, even at your university, at GU, at KTH, we do have SACOS, which represents you. You cannot join directly SACOS, but by joining the Swedish Graduate Engineers and by being employed at a university, you're automatically being represented by SACOS in negotiations, and you as well can turn yourself towards the local SACOS representatives, and they can help you. Yet again, that presupposes membership. You do not have to be a member in the Swedish Association of Graduate Engineers. You are not forced to be a member, but naturally the more we are, the better we can negotiate. And keep in mind that roughly 75 to 80% of the whole of the working population in Sweden actually is member of a trade union. So it is not unnatural to be member of a trade union. And the Swedish Graduate Engineers, we are a trade union, we are politically neutral, so we do not adhere to any specific party or what have you. So I think, having said that, there are loads of regulations out there which do regulate your employment. Above that, when it comes to doctoral candidates, there's as well something which is called the Higher Education Ordinance, Högskoleverordning. So this is something which is above everything else that I showed you right now in this picture. The Higher Education Ordinance regulates very much the different types of both your employment and as well your enrollment, you being a doctoral candidate. It says basically that you're supposed to be enrolled in order to count as a doctoral candidate. So if you carry out some work and you've been referred to as doctoral candidate but you're not enrolled, then you are by law not to be considered as a doctoral candidate. We refer to those people as shadow doctoral candidates. If you are enrolled as a doctoral candidate, then you're as well entitled to employment at university. But that does not mean that you do have to have an employment at university, because you can have an employment at another company in the private sector, or you can as well have a scholarship, right? The Higher Education Ordinance as well stipulates that you're supposed to have an ISP, Individual Study Plan. We're going to talk about that. The Higher Education Ordinance as well stipulates that you're entitled to supervision. And the entitlement, it just says you're entitled to supervision. So even if funding has come to an end, you're still enrolled but not anymore employed, you're still entitled to supervision. It says as well that you're supposed to have at least 2 supervisors. And it stipulates as well what happens with regards to withdrawal of resources. So loads of questions that doctoral candidates have actually in some ways refer to the Higher Education Ordinance. But then there are collective agreements in place which do stipulate the working hours, which do stipulate the benefits you're entitled to, such as additional sick pay if you happen to be ill, and it stipulates as well the salary or the salary step. Bear in mind as well that most salary steps, they are just the lowest possible salary that someone can have on a certain base. It doesn't say that you're not entitled to have a higher salary than what it actually says in the salary tariff.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely. Hi, Daniel. Daniel is
Hey.
next to me here in the studio in Stockholm.
Yeah, I just checking. We keep getting very interesting questions here from our listeners. We have one also from when it comes to collective agreements, since you were mentioning it. Does all universities have collective agreements? For example, Chalmers is the.
Chalmers does as well have a collective agreement. It's again, if you go back to my Swiss cheese, I do not tend to flip around in my presentations, but let me do it, right? So, even though at Chalmers you are an employee on the private sector, Chalmers as well adheres to the collective agreements for governmental employees. They are just like in a certain in-between situation, but they decided as well to give the same rights as governmental employees normally have. So it's the same general collective agreement that applies, and then naturally they do as well have a couple of those green Swiss cheese fillers just like at KTH and GU with regards, for example, to working hours or other questions that are regulated there. So naturally, Chalmers, there's no difference with Chalmers except for the fact that they are a little bit of a different kind of legal body, I would say. Thanks for your question. Keep them bringing on. At the very end, because I won't be able to respond to all of the questions because I see Daniel working here in the corner a lot and all those questions just coming in, you're going to get my email address towards the very end. At the same time, I think I will already answer loads of questions that already came in so far throughout the presentation. So bear in mind, I'm with you. Individual study plan. The individual study plan is, I'd say, the most important document. I do as well refer to it as your project plan, and it's a project plan that both parties have agreed upon. So now you might ask, what kind of parties? Well, the parties are on the one hand you as a doctoral candidate with a very specific aim to submit this thesis and to survive until then. And you have on the other hand, you do have your supervisor. Your supervisor is your older colleague who is there to introduce you to academia, to help you to become a successful researcher. But that means as well that the project plan, the ISP, is to be established jointly. It's not you who's supposed to sit down the first 2 months of your doctoral candidate time to sit down and just write this project plan. I've heard about that. No way. You're supposed to do that together, jointly, with your supervisor and your co-supervisor. And this project plan, you're supposed to have one. You're supposed to update it at least once a year. But hey, just once a year, this is the minimum base. If something happens, if a lab equipment breaks down and you can't carry out your research for 3 months, update your ISP, because you won't be able to fulfill the deadlines as they put down in the ISP. So you are as well obliged to have one. The project plan is very important and is your protection. Because if ever anyone claims that you have not fulfilled what you're supposed to do according to what it says in the ISP, and the ISP is not updated, then the person does have a piece of paper where the claim basically is proven and can be used against you. So in order to protect yourself, make sure to update your ISP, update it jointly together with your supervisor and your assistant supervisor. And please do not hesitate as well to put down revision, do as well not hesitate to put down how much supervision you need right now, and as well who's the person who's the best to supervise you, the 2 of them, 1 of them, what have you. So feel free to update it and feel free to put down the things that are important to you in order to reach your final result of the project that you're on right now. Supervision. As I said, you're enrolled according to the Higher Education Ordinance. You're entitled to at least 2 supervisors, normally a principal supervisor and a co-supervisor. At different universities, there are different rules on the mandatory qualifications. I would definitely say that every person who is a supervisor, principal supervisor, should have undergone a certain type of mandatory supervisor training. Because it's all about quality. It's not said that if you do not go through a mandatory supervisor training that you're not a good supervisor. But likelihood that you are a good supervisor, I would say, improves by going through a course where you will learn how to be a good supervisor. And it is very important for me to tell you that the supervisor is not your manager. and this might sound very provoking, but the supervisor is an elderly colleague, or a more senior, sorry, because it's not about the age, is a more senior, more experienced person who is there to introduce you to research. Okay? Sometimes the supervisor can happen to be a manager as well, such as prefect. But in this case, I think it is very important that both the supervisor is clear, the supervisor slash prefect is clear when they talk to you on what basis they act. Are they A supervisor or are they B manager? Because there are different responsibilities for those different roles. A manager is there to take care of your work environment. A manager is there to acknowledge your application for vacation. This is not your supervisor. Supervisor is there to help you carry out and improve the research you're doing. You're as well entitled to change of supervisor. I've been working for 7 years now with questions related to doctoral candidates. And my best tip there is, if you want to change a supervisor, you consider doing it. Do not wait for 7, 10, 15 months when things normally go worse and worse. If you want to change supervisor, do it quick. Get support of the trade union. Get support of a doctorand ombudsman if you feel for it. If you don't feel for it, you're entitled to change supervisor. Send an email to your manager saying, I want to change supervisor. Naturally, I would as well naturally recommend to talk things through with your supervisor why you want to change supervisor, because that can be a face-threatening act to the supervisor as well. So make sure not to be blunt and just saying I'm entitled to. Be a little bit street smart if you want to change supervisor. But do not hesitate to call us. If you're a member of our trade union, Swedish Graded Engineers, or if you're a member of another trade union that adheres to SACOS as well, do not hesitate to contact the local SACOS representatives. They as well can help you how to be street smart with regards to changing a supervisor. But as said, if you think of it, do it quick, and maybe as well try to establish a dialogue with your supervisor about the reasons why you want to change. Most of the times, problems can be solved in a very friendly way without anyone losing his or her face in such a situation. So, duration of employment. For how long can I be a doctoral candidate? Well, Higher Education Ordinance says that you are entitled to 4 years of salaried full-time studies for a doctoral degree. Reality is that the biggest amount of doctoral candidates, I think it takes them about 4.5 years of employment to get their degree done. So where does that come from? Why are they suddenly, because it says just 4 years, why can they work longer? Well, you're entitled to extension of employment if you are employed as a doctoral candidate at this specific university, not if you're out in a company. There this doesn't apply. But if you are employed within a company as a doctoral candidate, within the university as a doctoral candidate, you're entitled to extension of employment. Extension of employment adheres if you're on parent leave, if you're on sick leave, or if you carry out departmental duties. Parent leave and sick leave, 1 day of sick leave entitles you to 1 day of extension. Make sure to note down the amount of days that you're off ill, and as well make sure as well to have a yearly meeting with the department's administrator in order to discuss your sick leave days, in order as well to see how many remaining weeks, months or years of employment do I have, taking into account all those extension founding days. And there we do as well have those departmental duties. What does actually count as departmental duties? Well, what counts naturally, that is teaching. Definitely one of those things that do grant extension. How much extension am I entitled to per hour that I teach? Difficult to answer. Most of the time down to regulations by the individual institution or by an individual university. If you feel unfairly treated with regards to extension for teaching, I would recommend you to first of all meet up with other doctoral candidates and discuss how much extension they do get granted, and above that as well, do discuss that as well with the local SACOS representatives. What counts as departmental duties above teaching? Well, course administration, yes it does. The administration or organization of a conference, yes it does. Basically, departmental duties is a very wide notion. If you look it up, what those who have written the Higher Education Ordinance have thought is that departmental duties is everything apart from research that is there to help the doctoral candidate to work in the future as a successful researcher and or teacher. So it's quite a wide notion. Cleaning lab equipment or cleaning toilets definitely does not qualify, I would say, first of all, as departmental duties. When it comes to lab equipment, this again is a little bit debatable. But I think, as said, cleaning toilets definitely does not count as departmental duties, because I cannot see how this will turn you into a more successful researcher in the future. Can a doctoral candidate who is employed with the university, can she lose her job? Well, what happens is, as I said, doctoral candidates who are employed, they as well enrolled. So what happens is that you can get a withdrawal of supervision and other resources after your case has been investigated. So let's say your supervisor claims that you're not fulfilling the requirements according to your ISP, then the university can withdraw those resources. They can choose then to not extend the one-year contract that you're on, because you're always on a one-year contract, apart from Chalmers, where you're on a 1-2-2 contract. The doctoral candidates nonetheless remains enrolled and can as well appeal the decision to withdraw the resources to the principal. And as you are still able to, if you're still able to fulfill work, i.e. keep on writing what we're supposed to write, and if you can show that you have results of considerable quality and scale, then you can basically regain again as well those resources. So you cannot lose your job, but the resources for the funding of your job can be withdrawn, and it's naturally quite hard to show results of considerable quality and scale if you do not have a supervisor that helps you, and if you maybe do not as well have access to the lab because resources have been withdrawn. So if there's ever the kind of already threat in the room that you might not fulfill your duties according to the ISP, the first thing you should do is naturally look over your project plan and examine that one, do it together with your supervisor as well in order to help you back in track. And if really resources have been withdrawn or you're at the brink of it happening, then please do contact again SACOS representatives, and as well check there are doctoral students representatives at different universities which are called Doktorandombudsman in Swedish, whom you can get in touch with and as well discuss those matters with. SACOS represents you as an employee, and the Doktorandombudsman does represent you in your form as an enrolled individual. So, are there any interesting questions coming in? Because I see Daniel working here to my left side in the studio in Stockholm. So
yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions coming in, and I think some of them we'll come back to. I think some of them you are partially answering. There's one I think here that was interesting also to ask, and there was a couple of questions about salary here also. Are we going to come back to that later?
No, we won't.
No. But this, like, what is the salary base for doctoral students hired by the universities? Is one, and also how much salary as we come as an example here, optical engineer in a small company. Do you know that on top of your head?
No, we don't know it on top of our head.
Is
but
there any
what
way
I know is
out?
that the Swedish graded engineers, we have a fantastic salary statistics where you just can look up loads of different weird graphs and those kind of things, everything engineers and I and everyone else who works for salary likes. Yeah. But with regards to the question of the base salary for doctoral candidates, as I said, this is subject to the red part of the fill-in of the green part of the fill-in of the Swiss cheese, because salaries for doctoral candidates, as they negotiate in a tariff system, can differ from different universities to different universities because they are locally negotiated. So KTH has one salary tariff system compared to GU, which does have a different salary tariff system. So this is something you might want to check with your local SACOS representatives. Just hook them, say, listen to me, I'm wondering about this base salary, and as well about how my salary develops throughout the years, throughout the progress, because that is well subject to the regulations according to the local collective agreement at your university, basically. The question with regards to, was it optical engineering?
Yeah.
That one, unfortunately, if you're a member of the Swedish Association of Graded Engineers, you can get in touch with my colleagues with the members helpline who are here to help you, and you as well do have yourself access actually to the salary statistics. So right now you can basically open a separate window and you can go in if you're a member and check with this huge salary statistics which we have.
We had a couple of questions also, if I may, when it comes to like the project plan and the ISP. Is that the same thing, or what's the difference?
No, I would say basically the ISP is your project plan.
Right.
So because sometimes it's a little bit misunderstood. Sometimes the ISP is kind of this dirty little secret that's just somewhere down there in a corner, and no one looks at it, and every one of you just kind of take it out, dust it off, and then, oh, we have to revise that one. Right. But this is not how it's supposed to be. I would recommend you to consider the ISP to be a project plan, and as well to use it like that. So just put down, if you're going to go to a conference, put down as well who funds you for that conference, or where the funding for this conference comes from. Put down when you want to publish this specific article in certain type of journals with different impact factors, what have you. So use that, and use that as a debate base with your supervisor as well. This is how I think I can reach my goals. What do you think? Because they're supposed to teach you.
Right. We had also one, I think is good to put in here also, is if doctoral students have a contract up to licentiate, what will be the path for finishing education to reach a doctoral degree?
Oh, that's a great question. I wasn't taken refer to that. Well, as you see, there are two different types of this kind of academic merit, which is higher than a master, and there's the licentiate, which is 2 years basically of full-time studies and 4 years of full-time studies. You can either be accepted, according to the Higher Education Ordinance, you can either be accepted onto studies for a licentiate degree or for a doctoral candidate degree. The thing is, if you are accepted on for a doctoral candidate degree, this means as well, and if you employ, this means as well that you're supposed to be employed for the full 4 years in order to be able to attain, or at least to try to attain, the doctoral candidate degree or the doctoral degree. Whereas if you're just there for 2 years, if you're just enrolled and as well employed for a licentiate degree, then you're just entitled to 2 years of employment. So this is basically one of those let's say situations where the employer safeguards herself against the fact that there may be no funding for 4 years, but they might have funding for 2 years, that they just take on the individual and say, all right, I take you on to do this licentiate, but there's no promise. So with regards to the roadmap, what happens afterwards, there's no promise for you to be able to go on. So what normally happens is that sometimes even doctoral candidates themselves are asked to actually apply for funding in order to be pursued, which is slightly unfair, because doctoral candidates are not in a situation where they can search for funding themselves, at least not for funding which will be able to support them for an additional 2 years. Right. So let's say that I'm not totally happy with this practical way of accepting people just only on a licentiate, because it is not a promise for an additional 2 years for the whole doctoral degree, unfortunately. But nonetheless, let's say as well that on the Swedish labour market, even a licentiate does have a certain value, because you can attain, after those 2 years, you can attain a degree which will naturally support and increase your possibilities to actually gain a job, because you will have been working with research.
Thanks.
And I think it's great that Daniel is coming in with questions here, so just keep them coming. Are they a lot, Daniel, those questions?
Well, it's come in.
Steady flow.
Steady flow, yes.
Yep, bring him on. Yep. Shall we go over to Social Security for doctoral candidates? So I'm going to cover 3 areas. I'm going to cover illness, I'm going to cover parental leave, and I'm going to talk about the pension system, or pensions system, because actually there are different 3 pension systems that we need to take into consideration when we talk about pensions. If you're ill, on the very first day, you're to report to your employer that you're ill. You don't have to show a medical certificate on your first day. That can wait up until day 6 of, of the illness. But I do definitely recommend you to report it to the employer. We have, unfortunately, at university, in this case, unfortunately, otherwise I'm happy about it, we do have trusting working hours. So you just have an annual work hour that you're supposed to do if you're employed at the university. So you just work those 1,700 hours per year, and you can choose yourself when to work. So ideally, if you're ill on a Monday, you think, all right, I'm just a little bit ill today. I'm fine. I'll be fine tomorrow. So I'm just going to kind of recap this day that I couldn't work on a Monday. I'm going to work it on a Saturday instead. And yep, you're free to do so. At the same time, if people are ill, sometimes or many times people are ill because of both the social and as well the building reasons at your employment which cause a certain illness. So if people do fail to report to the employer that they're ill, this means as well that the employer won't be able to see if the statistics of people who are ill shoots up. If the employer does not see that statistics shoots up, they maybe won't be aware of the fact that there are certain issues, problems that the employer actually needs to be working with. So there's a little bit of a two-sided problem, those working hours. So therefore I do really recommend you to report illness in. And as well, again, you're entitled to extension for every day that you're off ill. So you're not, in some ways, short-sighted. Yes, you're losing a day. On the long side, you're not losing anything because you will be entitled to this extension. So help both the employer to understand, to see if there are issues with regards to illness, but as well help yourself with regards to the entitlement to extension that you report in as ill. You are, on the first day of your employment, you're not entitled to any payment. This is the so-called waiting day. You won't receive any salary there, right? Puts you a little bit back, it does, but that's all right. Day 2 to 15, you're entitled to 80% of your income, which is paid by the employer. From day 16 on, it's not anymore your employer who's responsible for the income, but it is instead the Social Security Agency, or in Swedish, Försäkringskassan, which is responsible for the so-called sickness allowance. The sickness allowance is unfortunately capped. So the cap is at 23,000 kronor. So if you earn, as a doctoral candidate, 24,000 kronor, you will nonetheless just receive a maximum of 23,000 kronor from the Social Security Agency. It's not very much if you earn 25,000 going down to 23, but if you earn 55,000 going down to 23, that's a huge drop. Therefore, we do have a collective agreement which says that if you're employed inside the government, you do receive 10% of your income from your employer. So you both get the sickness allowance and 10% of your income from your employer. If you work in the private sector, there are as well collective agreements in place which do give you as well 10% of your income from your employer, but there's a certain limit with regards to the amount of days that you're entitled to this additional sick pay from your employer. If you're ill for a longer time, and there maybe I'm talking about issues that do relate to things such as burnout, you are first of all entitled to rehabilitation meetings. It's not that you're just off, especially not if something relates to bad work environment. It's not that you just can be off for 5 months and then you just go back, bam, and you work 100%. This is why there are rehabilitation meetings. And those rehabilitation meetings between you and your employer, and as well if needed, your medical doctor can as well come in there. You discuss with each other how you can slowly get back into work, how the employer can adapt your workload, and as well in this case those rehabilitation meetings you should definitely as well discuss through your project plan, the ISP, in order to see how can again the ISP be adapted to the situation you're in because of your illness. We do as well recommend, if you're a member of a trade union, that you do contact SACOS. They as well can help and support you with rehabilitation. And as well, again, update your ISP. As I said, this is just kind of really, really important to do so. So, parental leave. Parental leave in Sweden is great. I myself am not Swedish, did not grow up in this country. When my first kid came, I thought like, okay, I'm just going to do it like everyone else does it here. And then I just realized, oh, I have to be off for at least half a year, because that's what all the other, both mums and dads do, being off for half a year. Well, that's great. Let's do it. And it was great. I just can really recommend it to you. But the question is, when do I have to notify the employer? Well, you do have to notify the employer if you want to be on parental leave at least 2 months prior your expected date of being on parental leave. So let's say if you expect your kid to be born in 3 months, you're not to tell, right? You don't have to. Not earlier or not later than 2 months before the child is expected to be born, you have to tell your employer. You are, throughout the parental leave time, you're entitled to 3 periods of parental leave per year, which basically means that if you apply for 2 months in a row parental leave and then an additional 2 months and an additional 2 months, then all of those need to be granted to you by the employer. But if you then apply for a 4th period, the employer actually can delay the onset of this time. So if you apply for parental leave, be smart and just apply for a longer period of time already from the very beginning, because you're allowed to those 3 periods of parental leave per year. The parental allowance, I can tell you that parental allowance and parental leave in general, I'm going to give a seminar tomorrow which is an hour and a half just on parental leave and your benefits as an employee. So those kind of questions I won't be able to answer here and today, but be aware at least, or be advised, that you're entitled to 480 days of parental allowance per couple, and then there's certain legal regulations of how they are to be split up between those 2 people who are in the couple. If you're just one person who has a kid, then there are a couple of different rules and regulations that apply there. You will be entitled to 80% of your income from the Social Security Agency, which is a maximum of 38,000 kronor, and which is well subject to your choices you make, because you can choose the amount of parental days that you want to take out and so on. For that, luckily, the Swedish Security Agency has loads of important and good information on its website that you might want to look up there. There's as well one guide for parental leave, for example, available on the Social Security Agency's website. So do not hesitate to go there. Unfortunately, with regards to information in English, it's not as good as I would have wanted it to be, but from what I'm aware of, they're working on information in English as well. So 80% of your income, a maximum of 38,000 kronor from the Social Security Agency, and above that as well, you're entitled to 10% of your income from your employer. So let's say that you earn 25,000 kronor, then you will receive a maximum of 20,000 kronor from the Social Security Agency if you're on parental leave, and then you will get an additional 10% of those 25,000 kronor, i.e. 2,500 kronor per month from your employer paid out to you. Presupposes normally that you hand in the slip from the Social Security Agency where it says that you do receive parental leave allowance. Again, parental leave entitles to extension of your employment contract. So again, if you know that you're expecting, or if you know that you are going to that you want to be on parental leave, do not hesitate to sit down with your supervisor and discuss through what kind of effect that will have on your on your thesis, on the whole project. And yeah, just saying, please do not push through with your thesis, even though you might have a kid at home. If you can and want to be at home, I do really advise you to do so, because it develops you as a human being. The pension system.
I can drop in a couple of questions if you
I'm just worried about the time, but yes,
yeah,
we might take one question. Can we take? Absolutely.
One quick, yeah. Because it was on parental leave, and maybe you mentioned it and I missed it, but I had a question from a person who said, what happens if I have to go on parental leave and the funding for my research project ends during the time that I am gone? We also got a question about, which I can answer very quickly, like, is it okay if we share this video afterwards with anybody who has not been here? Of course, that is naturally okay. And if anybody missed that, then we will send this link to this video also afterwards.
So you can look at me as many times as you want to. I know, yeah, it won't do you good, but you can, naturally, yeah.
Amazing.
Yes, the question with regards to what happens if on parent leave and funding runs out. Yes, great questions, and this is where we basically already right now can come to the term that, yes, this is a problem, that you have entitlements based on your employment, you do have entitlements based on the fact that you're a parent, but those who hand out this stipend maybe have not taken into consideration that people who are actually on this, sorry, not stipend, who are on the funding, that the funding givers maybe might not have figured out that people can be on parent leave. I think in this case, we would have to look naturally at the type of funding. Is it just funding for you, which in some ways kind of refinances your employment? Then this might be a lot easier than if there's funding for the whole research group and you're just one important part of this research group. I think if that happens, nonetheless, I think a dialogue is needed. And this is maybe where you need to have a dialogue both with your supervisor, but as well with your manager. Do not hesitate to discuss those kind of things with your manager, because at the end of the day, we're supposed to have workplaces where it is possible for people to be on parental leave. That's even what it says in the law, that you need to be able to combine both work life and private life with regards to family matters. So I think, first of all, try to establish a dialogue of how to solve that issue, and I think there might be clever solutions to this issue. But I do understand the general problem, but I think it needs to be talked at least about, it needs to be addressed in order to find solutions to that matter. And as well, do not hesitate to contact the local SACOS representatives who might as well be able to give you some additional input on how to solve with that matter. I do wish you good luck with that point, and then yeah, if you're a member of the Swedish Graded Engineers, I'm naturally available to you, and as well all of my 49 splendid colleagues who work with those questions. This is the pensions pyramid, Swedish one. Looks different in different countries. In Sweden, you are entitled to the national insurance. Everyone who works is entitled to national insurance, which is split up in income pensions and premium pension. About 18.5% of your income up to 42,000 kronor is shoved into the national insurance. If you're employed at an employer with collective agreement, mostly, you're entitled to occupational pension as well, so there's some additional money, some additional part of your salary is shoved into the pension system. And then above that as well, we do have the private pension system. This is something that you yourself are responsible for. The national insurance does as well have this color here. Down here you see this orange. They just invested loads of money into the development of this color, because that's the Swedish Pensions Agency who sends out as well letters on a yearly basis. Occupational pension, which is for governmental employees, taken care of by SPV and or Korpan, comes in blue. This is why I use those colors here. What happens is basically money, certain part of your salary, certain parts of your salary, 18.5% with the national insurance and 4.5% plus a little bit more depending on how old you are and what have you, is being shoved into those different pension systems. So if you retire here in Sweden in the future, well, then you will apply for the pensions from both the national insurance and the occupational pension separately. If you've worked in different sectors, then you will have earned money into occupational pension in different occupational systems, because according to depending on the sector, we do have different occupational pensions, unfortunately. And you basically will then be entitled to this money. If you move outside of Sweden, but you want to reside in the EU, so mind me, soon not anymore England, but any other so far yet EU country, you will be able to apply through the country that you reside in for the national insurance in the country you reside in, and then they will negotiate with the Swedish pension system. Whereas the occupational pension, you yourself will have to remember that you actually earned some money into the occupational pension back then, and you will have to apply yourself with the agency that actually takes care of the occupational pension. If you move outside of the European Union, you yourself will have to apply for national insurance. There's no coordination carried out, and as well for the occupational pension. And as well, you will never be able to get a certain payout of the pension you've earned in Sweden. This is the question I most of the time get. Well, but now let's imagine I'm just going to stay here for 2 years. Will I get a one-off payment of the pension savings I have and take them with me? This works in other countries, from what I've heard, but it doesn't work in Sweden. In Sweden, your pension savings will always remain here, and then you will have to make yourself known when you reach retirement age according to the Swedish legislation. When you enter retirement age, you will be able to apply for the different types of pensions. So you yourself need to be aware of that. You yourself need to make yourself known as well if you want to take out any of the pension savings. And this is as well something you might want to take with you, because we do encourage academics to have an international career, naturally. And in every single country you will come to, the pension system will look differently, and you will have different types of qualification rules of when you earn contributions towards the occupational pension, those kind of stuff. So you yourself do yourself a service and save the paperwork, ask someone to explain the system to you, how it works, in order to understand it, and that you're not forgetting that you actually do have pension savings in a certain country. So please do save the paperwork. And that might sound really weird because we are in the Internet of Things and what have you time, but pensions agencies are still working very much with paperwork. So keep that and try to understand the system every country you come to. Try to understand it, and then at the end, whenever you turn 70 and whenever we will be entitled to actually take out our pensions, you have to remember that you still have a couple of quids saved as well in the occupational pension in Sweden. So we're slowly coming towards the end of this presentation, and this is well why I just put towards the very end, what happens if employment comes to an end? When employment comes to an end, there are different agencies which do coordinate, which do work together for you to ensure that you will get a certain amount of income or unemployment benefit when you are unemployed, when you're out of employment. And I'm going to talk those through. I'm going to explain you the rules, how that looks like. And at the very end of it, I'm going to talk as well about what happens when the funding runs out. Because when the funding runs out, so that means you haven't finished your thesis, but there's still but there's no more employment, then this can get very tricky. And there are a couple of pitfalls you need to be aware of and that I want to warn you of. The Unemployment Benefit Fund, the A-kassa, there are 27 of them in Sweden. You just need to know one. You need to know the AEA. What's the difference between them? Well, there isn't really a difference between them because they all apply or they all adhere to the same legal regulations with regards to how much they are allowed to pay out. But they do have different types of membership groups. And the AA has academics as members, and academics do have proven to have a very little likelihood of being unemployed. Therefore, the members' contribution to the AA is very little compared to the artists' unemployment benefit fund, where the contribution is a lot higher of each individual because the likelihood of the group is higher to be unemployed. As well, bear in mind, and please, this is something I want you to share with your fellow colleagues as well, there's no such thing as a general unemployment allowance in Sweden. Or, where there is, if you get unemployed and you have not been member of the AEA, you will receive 8,000 kronor before taxes per month. And I know the housing situation that many doctoral candidates are in Sweden, they just pay 15,000 kronor each month for the housing. So this just doesn't work out. So this is why you have to join the AEA on your own behalf, and this is why it's separately from the trade union. And in order to be entitled to payoffs from the AEA, in order to be entitled to the unemployment allowance, you have to have been member of the AEA for at least 1 year, that date when you become unemployed. So qualification time is a year, and you as well have to have worked at least half-time throughout half of those 12 months. So 1 year qualification time is really important. So join the AEA as soon as possible, and as well do let your fellow colleagues know about that. Even Swedes don't unfortunately know about that. The unemployment allowance is a maximum of 20,000 kronor 20. You will never get more from the AEA. So even if a doctoral candidate can earn 32,000 kronor towards the end of the degree, they nonetheless will not get more than 20,000 kronor per month. Luckily, there's something in place which can give you the difference between your previous salary and the cap of those 20,020 kronor provided by the AEA. There are two things in place parallel, we can say. The first thing that is in place is the state transition agreement. This is for all governmental employees, so those employed in the private sector does not in the same way find application here. The state's transition agreement is something that social partners, so that means the Swedish engineers and other SACO trade unions together with the employers, have negotiated for all governmental employees. For doctoral candidates, the state transition agreement gives you access to support for transition, which means they will help you with finding new jobs, so they will kind of help you activate yourself, and they will give you 44 days of top-up of unemployment benefit. So that means they will give you the difference between 80% of your previous income and those 20,000 kronor paid out by the AEA. I'm going to show you a graph on the next slide where you can see what that actually means. Additionally, you as well, if you have been a member of the Swedish Association of Graduate Engineers, you will as well be entitled to the complementary income insurance. Complementary income insurance is part of your membership. It's a membership benefit. It's for free. You pay it basically with paying your membership, and it entitles you to 150 days of top-up of your unemployment benefit, just like the top-up from the state transition agreement. So if you are, first of all, if you get unemployed or if your funding runs out, well, if you get unemployed, the employer will have to notify the Job Security Foundation, or in Swedish Trygghetsstiftelsen, that your employment comes to an end as a doctoral candidate, and then they will get in touch with you, and then they will regulate the top-up of the unemployment benefit. And if you're still unemployed after those 44 days, and then we're talking about working days, so that means roughly 2 months, then you will be entitled, or you can apply to the complementary income insurance paid out by the Swedish Association of Graduate Engineers, or our insurance partner in that case it is. So both unions directly and indirectly by means of a collective agreement, they safeguard your income during unemployment as a doctoral candidate. And as I said, I've prepared a graph that comes here. So let's assume your income insurance, and now I feel right now just like a weatherman, I can tell you. So first of all, let's assume your previous salary as a doctoral candidate is about 30,000 kronor. If you're just on the basic benefit, then this gives you about 8,000 kronor before taxes. If you have been member long enough of the unemployment insurance, you will be entitled to the unemployment benefit, which gives you roughly 20,000 kronor. And if you're a member of the Swedish Association of Graduate Engineers, or you're entitled to the top-up of the unemployment benefit by the Security Foundation, then you will be entitled to those 20,000 kronor plus the top-up, which is kind of the difference between the unemployment benefit and 80% of your previous salary. So that gives you roughly 24,000 kronor. So those 4,000 kronor in this case do make actually a huge difference, because yes, they can make the difference between you being able to both pay for this expensive apartment and the living cost, or that you might be struggling. So we're really happy that we both negotiated that for you, but as well that this is a part of the membership benefits of the Swedish engineers. And the income insurance as paid out by the Security Foundation as well by the Swedish engineers is something that is subject to you being entitled to payoffs from the AEA. So this is why it is so important that every doctoral candidate who is employed joins the AEA basically now, in order to safeguard themselves. An AA membership just costs 110 kronas, so it's very little money and gives you huge benefit. So please as well do spread the information to everyone else who's concerned. So what happens if the funding runs out? So employment cannot be funded anymore, but I'm still enrolled. So sorry, employment cannot be funded anymore, but I'm still enrolled. I do not have money basically to finish my thesis. What happens? Well, first of all, you still will be enrolled, and as long as you're enrolled, you are a priori not entitled to the unemployment insurance fund payments, you're not entitled to parental leave, sick leave, and you're as well not entitled to the Job Security Foundation. It is a catch-22. I've spoken to many doctoral candidates who ended up in the situation, no employment, but still 2 months of thesis to write, or 5 months of thesis to write. Luckily, as you are enrolled, you're entitled to supervision and access to the building and all of that kind of stuff. Most of the time is where the employer leaves you with your office or with the office space you have, but you will not be able to claim unemployment insurance fund because you're still enrolled. The earliest time you can claim unemployment insurance fund is from when you have handed in your thesis to print. This is the earliest date when you actually can claim that one. You won't be entitled to parental leave or sick leave, or well, with a certain amount of restrictions because we count as a student, and students do have a different access to the social systems. So there's parent leave and sick leave for that period when there's no money left out is something you really might want to consider, and you as well might want to discuss with us, your trade union, or as well with the local SACOS, in order to know how you should behave best in order to make sure that you're not missing out on any of the benefits you might be entitled to. So when the funding runs out, this is a very critical situation, and I think the best thing is, if you know that you still will have work left when employment comes to an end, do get in contact as well with your employer to discuss the matter, but as well with your trade union to know where the pitfalls, what do you need to be aware of in order to not stand without any type of income, because this is basically what will happen when the funding runs out. So this is basically the end of my presentation. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Swedish graduate engineers, what we are doing for you guys, and you've seen my colleague Daniel both in a video and as well live, where we've been told you about the benefits you get from being a member. I just want to name a couple of things about our advocacy for doctoral candidates, and then I just want to go straight into the Q&A session. So the advocacy influencing the situation for doctoral candidates, just a couple of issues. I've already shown you beforehand that legal regulations for scholarship holders have increased just recently. It's something which is down to the work of the Swedish graduate engineers and other SACOS trade unions and other trade unions in general who have been working to improve your situation. We're as well striving naturally for better employment conditions for doctoral candidates. That means we want to have competitive salaries, so that people who accept a position as a doctoral candidate do not lose out on a salary development they would have had on the labor market in the private sector, for example. So that means that salary should be matched, and it should be a competitive salary, so that everyone as well in theory has to actually carry out research, because you as engineers, you basically frame the future of Sweden. You're very important for us, so the higher you're educated, the better this is for the whole of the society. We as well want to have a high quality of education supervision. That presupposes naturally that the governmental funding for technical subjects is to be raised. There's right now too little funding being shoved into technical subjects. If you raise those, that will naturally increase both education and supervision. And we do as well want that doctoral candidates should be prepared for a career outside of academia, and as well receive information about the labour market, because we know that about, I think, 55 or 50% of all those who do take a PhD in engineering definitely do not remain in academia, but will basically pursue a career outside of academia. And therefore it is very important that those people who actually enter academia and do their PhD are as well aware of the fact that there's as well a work life outside, and how they can make use of the highest educational title that there is in this country, of how they can make use of that one in order to promote themselves as well outside the private labour market. Because sometimes, from my experience, having a PhD but not being able to communicate your PhD and what you've gained through those five years, and how you can use that gain and how that can be of use for a future employer, can be a hinder to employment. So I think this is something which is very, very important to be aware of, and to be able as well to communicate to the outer society. And this is where we've come to the Q&A session. We have about 20 minutes. If you don't have any questions right now, which I doubt you do, because I see Daniel again working here and writing.
Plenty of questions.
If you don't have questions right now as well, you can send me an email, right? It might take me some time to answer those questions. It might as well be that I refer you to someone else. It might be as well that I refer you to the local SACO-S representatives. It might be that I refer to you one of my equally able colleagues. But do not hesitate to send them in. And if there are 300 of them, then we'll see. Then we need to discuss how to organize that. But
well, 300. We have about 50 questions at least.
50 questions. Okay, so maybe I will be flooded with questions.
Yeah, but some of them we have already answered. So.
Yeah. And above that, grab your phone, go to menti.com and enter the code 309271 and write your questions in there.
Yeah.
And now we have about 19 minutes to answer questions.
Right.
So,
and I have a few have come in. I'll see if maybe some more will drop in. But a few that I think is catches most of it. We won't be able to answer all the questions now, obviously. Sorry about that. But like I said, some other ways to go about it. First, can doctoral employment agreement exceed 5 years if the department duties happen to be more than a yearly amount of 20%? You understand the question?
I understand the question. Well, the Higher Education Ordinance says that the maximum amount of departmental duties per year is 20%. So I don't see how you should be able to basically work on departmental duties on full time for more than a year. So in that respect, I know that this happens, so you're not the only one, right? There are thousands out of there with the same issue. I think if that happens, we need to start discussing this matter. I know that sometimes doctoral candidates, they love teaching, and this is why they just work so much more than they're supposed to do. Sometimes they have to do more teaching than they're actually supposed to do. But there again, for both of those categories, we need to bear in mind that you are supposed to carry out research 80% of your time. You're supposed to focus on research. Because if you teach 60-70% of the time that he employs a doctoral candidate, there are two matters. The first matter is that you can't focus on research naturally, because research takes its time. It's a creative process. Above that as well, you are quite cheap for the employer to teach. Because if we refer that salary to a lecturer's or to an associate professor's salary, who as well are supposed to teach the same classes as you do, you're quite cheap. And I think the employer shouldn't take any advantage of doctoral candidates. So if you want to teach more, I'm sorry, please try to cut it down again. If you don't want to teach, take advantage of the Higher Education Ordinance and what it says in there, the maximum of 20% teaching throughout a year, and just take it up as a discussion with the employer. And if it's the fact that you actually have done a lot more than you're supposed to do, then yes, the employer should have to grant your extension for this exceeded amount of time as well that you have been teaching. In Sweden, people say, vi ska lösa det, we're going to find a solution. And I think as well with respect to that, the easiest solution is just to extend your doctoral candidate employment. If they can't out of some reasons, then there's well different types of ways of solving that. I would definitely encourage you to get into contact as well with your local SACO-S representatives at your workplace, because they as well can help you with that question. They are just as able as I am with those questions.
Right. And also, is the co-supervisor entitled to attend the ISP meetings, or have any meetings with the PhD candidate during her or his studies?
It sounds like a conflict here. Either the person does not want the co-supervisor to attend, or would really be happy for the co-supervisor to attend.
Probably.
I think so, one of those two. Maybe a third one is where I'm just not grasping right now. But, well, I mean, it's both. Supervision is something you're entitled to. You're supposed to have 2 supervisors. Then the 2 supervisors should take care of you. And I think the co-supervisor shouldn't just be something that just only exists on paper. A co-supervisor is a resource. Naturally, the resource of a co-supervisor does not get the same recompensation with regards to working hours as a supervisor does. But nonetheless, as well, the co-supervisor does get a certain amount of recompensation for time that he or she co-supervises you. So if you don't want the co-supervisor to assist to this meeting, then you should discuss that one with your supervisor, why you're feeling uncomfortable about that, because then it could be a matter of a conflict, or you might want as well to address the conflict with your supervisor. If there's a conflict present as well, you might want to discuss that with the local SAC or S representatives if you're a member of a trade union. You as well do have access to the company healthcare, Företagshälsovården, with whom you as well will be able to, where you can meet someone, psychologist, someone to talk things through, who as well might be able to advise you in your situation. If you want the co-supervisor to attend, as well discuss it with your supervisor. If your supervisor can help you in that matter, you can always as well turn towards the manager and discuss as well with your manager, the prefect, about the fact that someone is actually not doing what he or she is supposed to do. Before you go to the prefect, before you go to the supervisor, I would say first thing to do is as well to address the whole subject to the co-supervisor herself, because no one likes to be talked about before he or she has been talked to.
Right.
So first talk to the co-supervisor if you want the person to assist, and if that doesn't work out, from that on try to establish a routine on how to solve that issue.
Right. We have a couple of questions on the theme of salary increases, the staircases and so on. So I'll drop both of them on you, and you. So I heard the salary will increase year by year. Do you know how much? Is it said that the foreign students can have some tax or insurance free for the first 2 years? Is that true? Is the first question. And how could the union help if the supervisor does not increase salary step based on the time-based system?
That's a good question. The first one with regards to facilitation in tax matters, I will have to pass on that one totally, because I'm only working with labour law and not with tax law in any way. The only thing I know is kind of like a footnote. The only thing I know is that there has been a tax reduction for researchers in Sweden for researchers coming from outside the country, if there isn't such a research to be found in Sweden. And that tax relief has been for about a kind of duration of 2 years. But if I recall that one correctly, then this one actually has been abolished by the government, or it does not apply to doctoral candidates. But for that one, tax relief for researchers, please Google it, have a look at the tax agency Skatteverket's homepage in order to get an answer there. And now I just dropped the other question.
The second one is it is said that foreign students have some the salary steps. Do you know how much? And also what if this salary increases does not happen on that time basis?
So the salary steps and the actual amount of salary, this is subject to the local collective agreement at your university. So it depends on from university to university. So in your case, I would say hopefully you're already a member of the Swedish Graduate Engineers, or if not, join them straight away, and check with your local SAC or S representatives. Sometimes as well it's really easy to Google it. Just Google lönestige, doktoranda, and then your university's name, and you might find that one, because that is a document which is negotiated between the employer and the employees. So it means the trade unions and the employer, they negotiate those steps. So those are to be found locally at your university. Sometimes as well they are actually accessible through the staff portal of your specific university. If you just log in, they might have a couple of paragraphs in that one as well. The salary steps are, as a part of the yearly salary revision, they are being renegotiated on a yearly basis, and then they as well, normally they are just increased in some ways. But the progress, just as the other questionnaire said there, that the progress is based on how you advance in study time. And how you advance with regards to the study development is sometimes subject to a discussion between the doctoral candidate and the supervisor. And in many of those local agreements on salary steps, it says that you're entitled to go to the next step if your supervisor acknowledges that, basically sends a letter to HR saying yes, he or she has reached the next level, now you can up the salary. So if there's basically a discussion on how to interpret the salary step agreement at your individual university, I again would say get in contact with your local union representatives with SACOS so that they can help and support you. So they can both advise you on how how this agreement actually is to be interpreted, and they as well can help you with, if you want to, with supporting your claim against the employer. And again, it's interesting the question that the supervisor is the one who is to entitle your next salary step, because it's not the supervisor who's your manager with regards to who's responsible for your salary. This is basically your manager who's responsible for your salary, the same person who employed you, who hired you. Okay, so there again, yes, the supervisor needs to send in a certain certificate saying that yes, he or she has attained a certain next step. But if you can't agree together with your supervisor on what the next step is, or if you've achieved it or not, it might as well be worthwhile, after discussing that matter with your supervisor, that the two of you maybe as well present a case to the manager in order to make a discussion on that matter.
Mm-hmm. We are closing in fast to the finishing time.
But it's fun.
Here.
It's so much fun.
The questions are just pouring in.
Oh gosh.
So, but I think
email address,
exactly, right there. But it is one important thing I want to bring in here also. Is a question somebody asked that for how long do you need to be a member of Sveriges Ingenjörer or this association to be entitled for the unemployment compensation?
So first of all, the general rule says that first of all you need to be entitled to unemployment benefit from the AA in order to be entitled to the unemployment insurance from the Swedish Graded Engineers, and as well you need to have been member of the Swedish Graded Engineers for at least 12 months in order to be entitled to the unemployment insurance paid out by the Swedish engineers. So thank you for that question. And as well, with regards to membership and being entitled to help and support from the Swedish engineers, our bylaws say that you have to have been member of our trade union for at least 3 months before, or you have to have been member of this of the trade union for at least 3 months before you can get help and support with issues that appear. So if the issue has appeared before you join the trade union or within those 3 months from joining the trade union, we can give you advice. You're allowed to call our members helpline, but we will not be able to pursue further the case. And that same should normally as well apply to help and support from the local SACOS representatives, and they can always give you advice if you just recently joined the trade union, but they might not be able to help you out to start a negotiation to contact your employer if you have not passed the waiting time of 3 months to when the case is not supposed to have happened before, and inside those 3 months neither. So this is again where we come back to, if we consider membership in the Swedish Graded Association of Graded Engineers as a certain type of insurance, it's better to have that insurance before something happens and not afterwards just come in and try to join, because then you might reduce your likelihood to get any support or to get support in the question which might be really of importance to you. And this is where the reason why we're giving this presentation, because it's not said that you will end up in problems, but if you want to have a partner who stands next to you, who takes care of you, and who's there for you whenever you call us, then just do join us now and we won't disappoint you.
Right. Well said. Time has run out. And if you have any more questions, which I know you have because we have not answered even half of the
We
questions.
will be
come
going
in
through the log as well to see what kind of put in as well, what Daniel
Yeah.
filtered away.
All right, but we will if you have registered via to watch this via link, then we will send out this video and afterwards, and you also have a possibility to, if you have not been a member before, you can join, become a member, and you can get coaching by Friedrich and
Exactly.
through that. More information comes there, and if there are any more questions, just like we said, the email address also to Friedrich, and I think we're gonna stop there. So thanks for listening, and thanks to you, Friedrich, for joining us today.
Thank you,
Right.
and it's been a great pleasure being here today, getting all your questions, and don't hesitate to join us. We're here for you.
Yeah, it's been great fun. Good evening and goodbye.